What would you do if a new neighbor carved a driveway into your property without asking, and then had the gall to be rude about it? In today's story, a simple, brilliant plan shows exactly how to handle a bully who thinks he can take whatever he wants. I was visiting my friend, Sam, at his father Frank's house. It's located in an area where the land is so incredibly steep that all the driveways have to switch back up from the main road. A straight driveway is simply impossible. It would violate the building code for being too steep. A few houses down the road lived Arthur and Helen, a lovely older couple. For years, the lot next to them had been vacant, but it finally sold, and the new owner began construction on a house. Unfortunately, the lot was so steep that the new owner, a man named Mr. Sterling, built his driveway partially on Arthur and Helen's land. It was a massive cut, carved right out of the hillside with an excavator. This probably wouldn't have been a catastrophic issue if Mr. Sterling had just come over, introduced himself, and asked nicely, but of course, he didn't. In fact, Arthur and Helen had no idea what was happening until they returned home one afternoon. They were met with the sight of a massive, raw scar in the hillside, snaking up from the road, cutting across the corner of their property, and winding up to where the excavator was clawing at the earth. They were understandably upset, but being kind and reasonable people, they assumed it must have been an honest mistake. They walked over to speak with the machine operator, who didn't know much but happily provided the phone number for the new owner, Mr. Sterling. Arthur called him and politely explained the situation, but his new neighbor, a man he had never even met, was immediately hostile. He flatly denied that the driveway crossed the property line and was so rude that it left Arthur shaken and upset. As one commenter on the original story aptly put it, "Why are people rude to their neighbors? They live right next to you." At this point, Arthur and Helen were at a loss. They went out and double-checked the property pins, confirming the trespass was exactly where they thought it was. But further conversations with Mr. Sterling made it clear he was an unreasonable man who had no intention of negotiating. Mr. Sterling made a foolish decision at that moment, completely unaware that his dismissive arrogance would lead to his own downfall. Arthur and Helen didn't want to pursue legal action. It would be expensive, and frankly, the physical damage to their yard was already done. Yet, they couldn't just let someone walk all over them, especially a man who was going to be their neighbor for years to come. The situation stewed for a while as construction on Mr. Sterling's house continued. Then one day, my friend Sam's dad, Frank, ran into the elderly couple in the neighborhood. They recounted the whole frustrating story about their new neighbor. Now, Frank really likes Arthur and Helen, who don't have a mean bone in their bodies, and he was furious about how they were being treated. He went home and stewed on it himself, unable to get it out of his head. That evening, after a few beers, a brilliant idea sparked in his mind. He immediately called Arthur and Helen, explained his plan, and asked for their permission to carry it out. They chuckled and gave him their full blessing. So, Frank hopped into his rusty old full-size pickup, a beater he kept as a second vehicle, and drove it over to the couple's house. He carefully parked it directly across the encroaching driveway, making absolutely certain the entire truck was on Arthur and Helen's property. The next morning, the construction crew arrived, ready for work, only to find their path blocked. Some jackass had parked a shabby old pickup right across the driveway, making it impossible to get their vehicles and equipment up to the build site. They saw the note Frank had left in the window with his phone number on it and called him, demanding to know what was going on. Frank calmly explained that he had explicit permission from the property owners to park there and that, no, he would not be moving his truck. He added a crucial warning: if anyone so much as attempted to tow the truck, they would be charged with trespassing and theft. The construction guys wanted no part of a legal battle. There was no way they were going to haul all their heavy tools and materials up that steep hill by hand, so they simply called Mr. Sterling. They informed him that they'd be taking the day off, and would continue to take days off until he resolved his property dispute. Mr. Sterling was, predictably, furious. He called Arthur and Helen in a rage, but the couple, emboldened by Frank's plan, told him the exact same thing. The vehicle was parked on their own property, with their permission, and if he had a problem with it, that was his problem, not theirs. This reveals Mr. Sterling's greatest fatal flaw, his assumption that his new, elderly neighbors were powerless, a miscalculation that would ultimately seal his fate. After ranting and raving for a while, the reality of the situation sank in. His expensive house construction was at a complete standstill. He had no choice. He finally came to the negotiating table. In the end, Arthur and Helen received a significant sum of money in exchange for a formal easement, allowing the driveway to pass across the corner of their property. And Frank? He got several thank you cases of beer and the immense satisfaction that comes from putting an arrogant bully squarely in his place. It's funny, some legal commentators pointed out that if any mature trees were cut down to build that driveway, the couple could have sued for triple the damages, potentially amounting to tens of thousands of dollars. But in the end, Arthur and Helen were happy with the outcome, having stood their ground without a costly court battle. This story serves as a powerful reminder that bullying and disrespect are poor foundations for a new beginning. True strength often lies not in aggression, but in quiet resolve and a well-placed, rusty old pickup truck. What's the most clever case of neighborly revenge you've ever witnessed or heard of? Share your stories in the comments below.